The Bokeh might have been built by a headphone company with its foundations in DIY audio, but you would never know it. If you've been in this hobby for a while, you probably already know the story of ZMF headphones. If you don't, the cliff notes are that Zach, the founder of ZMF headphones, began by modifying Fostek's T50RP headphones to make them sound better. Today they make all of their headphones from scratch, using unique woods and some outstanding chassis and headband designs to make some of the most comfortable and gorgeous looking headphones on the market. On top of that, they're always tuned with a really deft hand. Unfortunately, they're also really big. These are not a portable headphone, but these are. The ZMF Bokeh is one of ZMF's most recent models, and it's their first attempt at a portable headphone. Don't let that put you off though, because this isn't some kind of a prototype. The Bokeh benefits from all of the years of Zach's experience designing other headphones, and it even includes some trickle-down technology from high-level models like the ZMF Atrium that I showed you a moment ago. The Atrium damping system single-handedly vaulted the ZMF Atrium headphone into being one of the most enjoyable headphones that I've ever tried. And now it's in the Bokeh too, and it's up to its old tricks. But the Bokeh isn't built quite like ZMF's other headphones, and that changes some things. A little while ago I spoke to Zach and Bevan. Bevan is Zach's wife and the co-founder of ZMF headphones, and they shared with me the journey of setting up to produce the Bokeh headphone. Being a lower priced headphone, they expected greater sales volumes, and therefore they needed a way to produce the Bokeh at a scale that they'd never needed to provide for the higher priced headphone models. What that meant was they had to change the design of the chassis, the connectors they used, the headband. A number of things had to change. I understand that it had to be cheaper. I understand that it had to be quicker and easier to make. But there's something I just don't understand. And that's how they made it so much better. The chassis on the older, more premium ZMF models is great. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But this new design is sleeker, it feels better, I think it looks better, and the fact that it allows the Bokehs to lay flat is an added bonus. While we're talking design, let's also mention the wooden cups. These are always beautifully made on ZMF headphones, but in the case of the Bokeh they're a slightly different shape and they're also a narrower profile. That helps to make them more compact for transportation, and on top of that, I also think it makes them look even better. The one thing I'm not such a fan of is the look of the new 3.5mm connectors in place of the old 4-pin mini XLR connectors. But it's a super minor thing and they don't look bad. Knowing that the use of the 3.5mm connectors means the headphones can be shallower and smaller because the 3.5mm doesn't take as much space inside the actual cup, that makes it even less of an issue still. Not that I would have even really called it an issue, it's just a preference for me. I like the look of the older style connectors. That's enough raving about the design and the build quality though. We do need to talk about where the lower cost of the Bokehs shows up more, and that's in their technical performance. The Bokehs can't match the performance of flagship closed-back headphones like say a DCA Stealth. What the Bokehs can do though is deliver some of the most natural and enjoyable sound that you're likely to hear from a closed-back headphone anywhere under $2,000. These start at a price of $1,669. So it turns out that on the ZMF website, I hadn't realised that it automatically had worked out I was in Australia and given me the Australian dollar price. And so what that actually means is that the Bokeh is not just amazing value at $1,669, it's actually $1,099, and that makes it ridiculously impressive. Depending on the options you choose to add, such as extra pads, tuning mesh that can go over the driver, and a hard carry case if you want it. The Bokehs are not as clinical as a headphone like the DCA E3, and they're not quite as coloured as a headphone like the Lyric 2. Instead, they sit in a sweet spot that for me is reserved for headphones like the Sony MDR Z1R, only the Bokehs are properly portable and properly gorgeous. Making the sound in the Bokehs is a liquid crystal polymer dynamic driver, and that just basically means that it's a fancy dynamic driver with a light and very rigid dome. It produces a sound that's a little bit crisper than something like the biocellulose driver that's in the Atrium or the Auteur, but it's not quite as crisp as something like the beryllium driver that's in the Verite range. all of those being ZMF headphones if you're not familiar. Not only is this the first ever ZMF headphone to use a liquid crystal polymer driver, it's also the first of their dynamic driver headphones to drop the impedance below a high impedance of something like 300 ohms. Being a portable headphone, the Bokehs needed to be easy to drive from anything: a smartphone, a dongle, a laptop, a digital audio player, whatever you want. And so the Bokeh has an impedance of 80 ohms and a sensitivity of 103 decibels per milliwatt. That means you can achieve 110 decibels of output with just 5 milliwatts of power. Not that you should listen anywhere near 110 decibels, but it's a nice reference point to know that if you can comfortably achieve 110 decibels, then at normal listening levels, your amplifier is not even going to be breaking a sweat. And so in other words, whatever your source is, it can drive the Bokehs, I promise. As for how the Bokehs will sound when you connect them up to that source, that's a little bit more complicated. Just like all ZMF headphones, the Bokehs give you the choice to roll pads, and that gives you a bunch of different sound profiles to choose from. The stock inclusion with the Bokehs is the hybrid pad, but I've also tried a suede pad and a solid leather pad with them. Swapping between the suede and the leather shows that the leather produces a slightly thicker sound because it's got increased bass, but vocals are still nicely separated and clear, so it's not an overly thick sound across the whole range. Having said that, the suede is more balanced across all frequencies to my ears, and it's got a slightly more delicate touch overall. Part of that is that the leather pad also adds a little bit more bite in the treble region, and that's going to be great for those of you that like really edgy guitars or snappy snares and cymbals. For me though, I personally prefer the top end from the suede pads. The suede pads deliver a more enjoyable sense of space and staging from the Bokehs, and the Bokehs are actually excellent in that regard for a closed back headphone. Much like the Atrium open headphone, the Bokehs present a lovely sense of depth and width in the soundstage, but they don't create quite the same degree of scale of space that the Atrium opens do, and that's normal because we're comparing an open back to a closed back. For a closed back, the Bokehs are fantastic. Switching now to compare the leather pads with stock included hybrid pads, and unsurprisingly, the hybrid pads sound like a mix between the suede and the leather. The hybrid sound is closer to the more neutral, balanced approach of the suede pads, but they do still have a dash of colour to their sound. The treble is also a bit smoother from the hybrid pads once again, and that's because the internal lining of the pad is suede, and that's going to absorb some of the extra energy from the treble. I find that the reduced bass from the hybrid pads also helps to open up the soundstage, but that reduced bass doesn't cost the sense of tonal weight and character from the Bokehs, it just balances things out better. And on that note, the Bokehs are a headphone that in general, I would describe as balanced, dynamic, but generally quite natural. They're close to neutral, but with a slight dash of coloration. And in fact, I'd go so far as saying that I cannot see anybody not appreciating the Bokehs sound. Whether you'll prefer them over similarly priced competition, that's a whole nother question, and we'll get to that shortly. At this point, having rolled through the pads a little bit, I thought I was agreeing with ZMF that the hybrid pads were the best choice. After all, they offer the perfect balance of the benefits of the leather and the benefits of the suede. But I think I might have been wrong. When I compared the hybrid and the suede pads more directly, the suede just sounds great. They bring the mid-range a little bit forward, that being the suede pad, and that gives vocals just a touch more weight without them getting thick or overly rich. They're also a touch easier on the transients without losing the right level of energy. They're not soft, but they're never edgy or aggressive, and they bring a wonderful sense of character to the sound of things like a plucked acoustic guitar. You get the energy and articulation of the string plucks, but that's balanced really nicely with the resonance of the guitar body. On top of that, the suede pads are also super soft and super comfy on the head. Of course, your pad preferences might vary a little bit from mine, and your source chain and the synergy with that source chain is going to play into this too. For these tests, I was using the Chord Dave as a DAC and the Burson Soloist Voyager as my headphone amp. That's a super revealing DAC and a refined but very resolving headphone amp to go with it. And so it won't be enhancing the aggression of the sound in any way, but it also isn't thick and rich like maybe a lush R2R DAC might be. The good thing though is that you can always just buy the pads that you want to try and roll through and find the best combination of pads with your particular source chain at the time. If you change source chains later, change the pads. And indeed, even though I probably prefer the suede pads a little bit, I do actually think the hybrid pad is the right starting point from ZMF. I think it's the right choice because it's going to be the most versatile across a whole range of source chains. It just happens that the suede works better for me on my source chain. Now, you might have already made up your mind about the Bokehs, but I think it's really important for us to discuss two more things. Firstly, how the Bokeh compares to similarly priced competition, and also which other ZMF headphones the Bokehs sound like, in case you want to capture the sound of your at-home headphones to take on the road in a portable version. My current go-to portable headphones are the $2,000 Meze Liric 2, and comparing these with the Bokehs using the suede pads, the Liric 2 is clearly the more coloured headphone. The Liric 2's treble is a little bit enhanced, it's a little bit coloured, and so sounds like sibilants have a bit of extra sizzle on them. It also serves to increase their sense of technicality, but in a slightly artificial way, I think. In other words, I don't know that the Liric 2s are actually resolving more detail, so much as just enhancing the detail they do resolve. The Liric 2 does legitimately pull ahead in areas like sound staging. That's one of their absolute strengths in my opinion. But both of these headphones are excellent when it comes to soundstage. It's a case of good and gooder rather than bad and good. Another area that I do slightly prefer the Liric 2 is that vocals are slightly more separated and a little bit more textured from those. From the Liric 2, it sounds a little bit like the microphone was closer to the singer. Not from a staging perspective, it's not like the singer gets closer to you, but you get more insight into all the subtle details of those vocals from the Liric 2. Having said that, it's not a simple win for the Liric, because the Bokeh to me overall sounds more natural and it's a little bit more easygoing. Not that it's lacking in dynamics and energy, it's got buckets of that. It's easygoing in the sense that the music's just more natural, you can engage with it and relax and lose yourself into it more easily. The Bokeh is going to work beautifully on any track, any recording quality, any system or chain quality. Whereas the Liric 2, with its very interesting tuning and interesting sound, can be distracting on some tracks and some systems. Perhaps the best way to illustrate the balance between these two is that if you were to put both in front of me and ask me to choose, I think it would be a 50-50 choice, depending on the day, depending on my mood. It would literally come down to a flip of the coin. The Liric 2 probably isolates external sound a little bit better, and I do like the fact that the cups are nice and compact, but the Bokehs are so beautiful, they're super comfortable, and they're lovely to interact with. Both have their own sonic benefits, and so I can't really choose. And with that epic fence sit by me, let's bring this home with a comparison between the Bokehs and the ZMF Atrium. I chose the Atrium for this comparison because it's the ZMF headphone that the Bokehs most remind me of. It's not a perfect match, they're not identical, but they're the most similar in my brain. I think where those similarities really begin is that both of these headphones produce a sound that is very natural and very enjoyable. Everything just feels lifelike and real regardless of which of these headphones you use. The Atrium does have a richer and smoother overall tonality, even with the suede pads on the Bokehs, but the Atriums never sound quite as thick as the Bokehs with the leather pads. There's a sense of ease and openness from the Atriums, in addition to that sense of warmth and smoothness, that the Bokehs can't match once you put the leather pads on. Things start to get a bit too thick on the Bokehs, whereas it stays easy and open with the Atriums. When we go back to the hybrid or the suede pads on the Bokehs, the sense of ease and openness is generally there, but now they lack that depth and warmth and body that's so wonderful from the Atriums. Another area that I think these headphones are quite similar is in their delivery of transients. Both of these headphones deliver the leading edges of notes with a sense of crispness and articulation, but that's never aggressive. They deliver a sense of energy and clarity, but in a way that's smooth and enjoyable. They're never aggressive unless the recording requires them to be. The Bokeh is a bit brighter up top compared to the Atrium, and that does bring the sense of clarity up a little bit, but that's not to say that the Bokeh is more technically capable. The Atrium is incredibly technical, it just somehow manages to wrap all of the detail in a lovely rich warm blanket before it delivers it to you. In other words, the detail doesn't stand out from the Atriums, but it's all there. It stands out a little bit more from the Bokehs, but in its own enjoyable way. The other key difference that I touched on earlier between the Atriums and the Bokehs is that being an open back headphone, the staging from the Atriums is significantly better, as you would almost always expect from an open back headphone. The Bokeh is still excellent in that regard though, for a closed back, and in many ways, as I started to think about this more, the Bokeh to me sounds a bit more like a closed version of the Atrium than the Atrium Closed does. And that's not saying the Atrium Closed should have had to sound exactly like the Atrium, they're different headphones. My point is more that if you've got an Atrium and you're looking to capture some of that sound, the Bokeh could be perfect for you. And I think similarly, the Bokeh is closer to something like an Auteur Classic as well. They've got a slightly different tuning, but again, they've got that very organic and natural delivery of the sound. In the end, the Bokehs are still a ZMF headphone, and therefore if you enjoy ZMF tuning, you're going to enjoy the Bokehs. And if you don't know ZMF tunings, you're probably still going to enjoy the Bokehs. I mean, really, to sum all this up, these Bokehs were sent to me by a channel Patreon member, Andrew, and I hope he enjoys all of his other headphones, because he's not getting these back. No, really. That's how good I think these are. These are an absolute winner of a headphone. The Bokeh might have been built by a headphone company with its foundations in DIY audio, but you would never know it. These to me are probably the best finished headphones that ZMF has ever made, thanks to the new chassis design and the new headband design. The fact that they're also one of the cheapest and, in my opinion, one of the best tuned overall headphones from ZMF is just crazy. If that sounds good to you, as always, links are in the description down below. And for now, thank you to channel members, to channel Patreon members, and to those of you that leave super thanks on videos like this one. If you want to work out which is the best closed back headphone for you around the price of the Bokehs, then watch my review of the Meze Liric 2 up here next, and that will then link you through to my review of the DONGLE DACS E3 headphone, which should round out your options in this $2,000 price point. For now though, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.